just for the sake of everybody watching, uh, tell me what exactly it is you write and how long you've been doing it, and also give me I guess, the best piece of advice you got as a new writer. We'll start with Rod.
Hi, my name is Rod Belcher. I write under the name R.S. Belcher. I have been a full-time writer since 2012. Pretty much that's been my sole source of income. And I write science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, horror. And I think the best piece of advice that I got was actually from David Coe, who told me that I asked him which of his books he liked the best, and he said he liked the second one best because that was when he knew that it wasn't just a fluke and that he had actually was able to do this for a living. And that was very wise, very sage advice.
My name is Katie Edwards. I write an urban fantasy series called The Tarot Sequence. The second book, The Hanged Man, just came out in December, and I'm working on the third book right now. I suppose the best piece of advice I ever got when I started the process of being a published author is you got to trust people to do their jobs. You have a job, it's writing. You have got to trust the PR people to do PR, the marketing people to do marketing, the editor to do editorial, the agent to do agent stuff. And if you don't, you're just going to go through a world of misery until you realize they're really good at their jobs and can do it, allowing you to refocus on what you do best.
I am Patrick Dugan. I write the Darkest Storm series and my Watchers of Asteria and some other stuff, urban fantasy and regular fantasy and all sorts of stuff. I've been doing this. My first book came out 2 years ago, as of this weekend. Yay. And then, but I've been writing, for 8 years before that. So before I got published. So the best advice I got was develop a thick skin because, being a writer, you get a lot of criticism. There's a lot of rejection. It can drag you down really quick if you let it.
I am Susan Rowdy. I write dark fantasy and horror as S.H. Rowdy. I also write romance as Siobhan Kincaid. I have been doing this, my first contract was in 2011. So, wow, it's been a minute. And probably the best piece of writing advice I ever got was don't expect everything to happen overnight because it won't. And if I had at all thought that I would still be exactly where I was when I started all that time ago, I probably still wouldn't be here, but hey, I'm having fun. So the panel is, of course, New Author Boot Camp. We're talking to people who are either in the process of writing a book or have just finished and have no idea where to go from there. So I guess we'll start at the beginning with the writing process. How is it that you guys get to where you are? How do you make time to write? What's your process for the creative side? Start with Katie.
Unfortunately, I write at coffee shops. So it's been a pretty challenging recent stretch of time because I've never been a person who can write in my own space. I need to be in another space with a lot of energy around me. But as part of being a new writer and wanting not just to have a first book, but a second and a third and a fourth, you've got to find that routine somehow. That's really your number one job as a writer. My agent says it to me all the time. That's your job. You write, you produce new content. You keep readers coming back for more. So I suppose that one of the challenges that the new writers are going to face is that I liked what you said, that it's not like the world necessarily changes after your first book comes out. You kind of think there's going to be a parade and a red carpet. And there is a really high that you ride for a couple of months. And then afterwards, you're back where you started. And you're alone in a room in front of a word processing program. And you got to make peace with that and realize that you're going to have some wonderful moments along the way and 95% grind.
I write right here. This is my writing space. I have a full-time job. So I, work, 8 to 5. But what I've done, and my wife is amazingly patient, is from 7 to 9 every night is my writing time. So I know that by 7 o'clock, I get home. Well, I don't now I just work from home. So, but you know, I basically log off of work at 5. We have dinner. I spend time with the family until about 7 o'clock. I'm butt in chair. And then I go until 9. If I'm really in the flow, and you know, I'll just write until, you know, I collapse. But normally I try to, you know, knock it off between 9 and 9:30, so I actually have some downtime before I go to bed. So, but it's all about routine. You just have to. It's a job. You know, the magic fairy dust does not come, you know, from some muse that brings her little wand in, and then you get a book. Although, you know, sometimes you're inspired and it feels like it, but it's not. It's all about button share, making sure you're hitting, you know, your deadlines when you're supposed to, and knowing sometimes you just have to walk away for a little bit because of burnout, or, you know, like in this situation, I have been far less productive than I normally am. So it's just kind of, you know, having a routine, but knowing when it's okay to break it.
Well, I kind of went the route of you know, the conquistadors, where they would, you know, land their ships and then set the ships on fire so they couldn't go back. That was pretty much my plan when I started doing this full time. Is a lot of I won't say a lot of the writing comes from panic, but it comes from, you know, bills got to get paid, lights got to stay on. I have kids; they're both grown now, but I try to help them out as much as I can. So those are all very strong incentives to kind of keep grinding. And it is grinding. It is absolutely button chair. That is very, very true. But I try to, it depends a lot on the project I'm working on. For example, when I was doing the Men in Black book, I was up half the night because to talk to the guy I was working with, the editor I was working with in the UK, I had to be up around 3:30 for us to talk. So I ended up with that one. It basically depends on the project. Some projects, it's I get up in the morning, do what I got to do, sit down and work until I kind of hit a certain, you know, number of words, word count for the day. And if that doesn't happen with another project, it may be I do other stuff all day and then I'm at it at 9 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning or something like that. So I do try to carve out a block of time. I actually, you were mentioned writing at coffee shops. My daughter has been working a lot, and I'm pretty much her transportation right now. So I would drop her off and then go to like Barnes and Noble or somewhere like that and sit and work. And I actually found that to be a lot more productive, because if you're at home, sometimes you will find some reason to not have your butt in that chair. And literally, I remember when I finished up Men in Black, I had to do another book. I was doing a book for Audible, and I came up with every excuse in the world not to start on that book. I was like, oh, I need to plant a garden. It's like, you know, the cat needs buffing. It was just anything we could figure out to kind of keep that from sitting down and doing that. So that's what I got. So that's my process. Booze helps too.
Well, it sounds like we've got a good mix of very different styles and personalities, so this is going to be fun. So, next up, we get the book done. Then we have to figure out what we're going to do with it. That tends to be the point when people think, okay, well, the book's done. The hard part's done. Hey, the rest is going to be a breeze. No. And the first hurdle is that decision. How are we going to publish this book? You have your options. You can go with a publisher. You can self-publish it. You can get an agent. You can go indie. So let's talk a little bit about that. Where do you guys land, and why did you choose what you did?
I have done small press and I have done indie. I've been querying agents for years and just haven't found a good fit with any of my stuff yet. So John Hartness at Falstaff published Darkest Storm, which has done really well. You know, as far as then I wanted to do some steampunk stuff, which generally, you know, doesn't do well in New York. So I just went ahead and published it myself, more as like, how do you self-publish the hard way? So, so I just did that, and now I'm shopping an urban fantasy about witches in Asheville, a coven of witches, and so that's going through the process of sending to agents and doing that sort of stuff. So I've kind of hit until I get an agent, I won't be able to do New York, but I've kind of hit all the other high spots.
I kind of hit the lottery a little bit because I sold my first book without an agent to a New York publisher, and very shortly thereafter, I started having people at that publisher ask me what I wanted to do next, and I had heard all kinds of horror stories about agents. I'd also heard folks that write that have agents tell me some really great things. So I kind of trusted in my friends, the people that I had kind of cultivated as friends who were in the business. And I reached out for a lot of advice, and I got this one agent's name that came up several times with several people that I respected and I kind of trusted. And I reached out to them, and I was able to basically, we came to an understanding. There are different types of agents. They're like the kind of the big sort of corporate agents. And then there are also agents who are from, other agencies that are a little more, I won't say mom and pop, but they're not these big, huge, corporate things. And I met someone, Lucianne Diver, and we had several conversations by email and by phone. She was interested in some stuff I was working on at the time. And we were able to kind of come to an understanding, because what I told her was, I said, look, I don't want to be rich. I said, if I end up being rich, yay. I'm not going to throw the money away or something. I'm not going to go all Alan Moore. But I wanted to, I don't expect to get rich. I don't expect to get famous. But I said, I've got kids and I need to make a living at this. And she was very true to her word. She has kept me busy and kept me in plenty of work. And I really am glad I made that choice. Now, one of my editors, the first thing I ever got published was a Star Trek story that Dean Wesley Smith was the editor of. And Dean and his wife are very much proponents of not having an agent. They believe you go it on your own, because they've had some really bad experiences with agents, and they've heard some really bad experiences from other writers about agents. So there really are two camps. I'm very glad. Within 24 hours of signing with Lucianne, she had sold a sequel to Six Gun Tarot, and she had sold a book called Nightwise. That was what I was working on at the time. So it was worth it. And like I said, I've never regretted going with her. But there are a lot of disreputable agents out there, and you really have to kind of do your homework. And if you go that route.
A lot like your story had been mine. I was really lucky throughout the process. Between finding an agent and an editor and a deal all happened within 2 weeks, but that's not a typical story. And I think that if I had to give some advice, because this is boot camp, I would talk about the step right before, which is that moment you feel you've got a product and you're ready to go out. I think that the two things you should really consider is, number one, hopefully you've been a part of a writing group. If you haven't, you might want to back up a step and find a writing group. It's not always easy to find one. Sometimes you have to go through 2 or 3 before you find the right one that matches you. But when you get a writing group you click with, it's worth its weight in gold. It'll level you up to the next, RPG terms, level you up to the next level as a writer. But it also will get you the ability to hear criticism and give criticism and respond to it effectively being the key word. So that's one thing I think you absolutely should do. But the second thing is, networking really is a powerful tool. And I never thought I'd be the person to say that. I am a huge introvert. The idea of walking into a room and networking, you might as well just send me out back and shoot me, and just, it's just not something I'm good at. But there are ways to go about doing that. I mean, just go to conferences and talk with people about something that interests you. Send compliments to writers you like. Go to their speeches and try to connect with them afterwards. If you're in a writing group and someone gets published, right there, you've got a networking contact. And that was actually one of the things that helped me skip over the query letter step and get at least a full manuscript in front of an agent. So those are two pieces of advice I think that I would give.
Could I add something to that just quickly, if it's okay? The way I sold my first book was I had been writing it. I went to Dragon Con and went to some of the panels that the various publishers were having where they were talking about what they were releasing that year. And usually at those panels, there'll be a lot of associate editors, and you get to talk to them after everything's over with. And I was very fortunate to meet an editor for Tor named Stacy Hill, and we started corresponding by email. And Stacy's really the one who got me in front of an editor for Tor. So I totally agree with that. It is difficult sometimes to go out and just like walk up and kind of like try to sell your, pitch your book or whatever. But it is, and the bar is actually not a bad place to try to do that either. Is, hang out at the bar, you're going to meet all kinds of pros, and you can develop some relationships that can hopefully get you to a place where you're getting published.
I also think, to play off that, it's more important to build a relationship than it is to pitch your book. You need to, because people want to work with people they like, and so if you're in the bar and you're hanging out and you're having a good time, you're much more likely to, build a friendship or a working relationship with that person than you are to just run up to somebody and be like, here's my book. They all go, yeah.
They love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, they live for that.
It's pretty much every day on Facebook these days. You get a new friend request. Here's everything I've ever done. Go get it right now. No. Yeah. Yeah. But no, you were Katie was talking about writing groups, and that was actually something we talked about the last time we did this, was how, finding the right group of people, because there are all different types of groups. For example, our tech guy over there who's got a glass shoved in his face, his wife is part of the writing group that we have, and he's usually there too, usually talking a lot and not writing, but he's ignoring us. So like I said, I told him I was going to talk about him when he wasn't looking, but anyway, we don't take ourselves seriously at all. We're there to just be as stupid as possible. But if there's an issue, we help each other. And that tends to be something I've noticed about our group that you don't see in a whole lot of other ones. There's always room for critique. There's always room for, well, read this and tell me what I did wrong. But, when you find a group of people you can sit down with and say, okay, I'm stuck, fix my book for me, and they do it, you've got something really special. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that we have that. Other than Katie or either of you two in a writing group?
I was in one for several years back when I think I sold the Star Trek story. I think I was still working on Six Gun. But it was extremely helpful, and we actually had some really great writers in there. One of the guys sent a story off to Weird Tales, and he had never, done any writing prior to that, other than maybe a little bit of just for pleasure, and got a 7-page handwritten rejection letter back from the editor at the time, and suggested that he re-examined the story, gave some suggestions about why they were rejecting it. And then at the end of it said, you can come on back and resubmit this. And he never did. He just couldn't handle the rejection. What I forget who was saying it earlier, but you really have to kind of have a tough skin. You have to have I think Patrick maybe, because you have to build up kind of a tough skin to deal with that, because you're going to get that. But yeah, the writing group was extremely helpful. It really was. It just kind of eventually, it's like a band, eventually you can't get to your practices and the band kind of falls apart. And, so I haven't been in one since then, because I've mostly been working, but if I ever had the opportunity, I'd love to try to jump back into one. That would be great.
I started off in an online one, and then, kind of the band fell apart. So,
We seem to keep collecting stragglers from everywhere. Every time one of us goes to a new event, we end up bringing somebody else home with us. we adopt all the weirdos because that's what we are. It's awesome.
You need weirdos to write the kind of stuff that we write.
Yes, yes, you do.
And read.
Well, yeah. I mean, and kind of a little bit of a sidetrack, but there is another writing group in Rock Hill where we usually go, and they're the types that they write high literary fiction.
Mm.
And they come in with all of their stuff neatly packaged and all very well dressed, very put together, very proper and intellectual about everything. And we're just a bunch of yahoos that go in and throw our stuff everywhere, and we're loud and obnoxious and laughing. And I can't tell you how many coffee shops we have run this group of people out. It's
Badge of honor.
Yes, and it's to the point now where when people are just that kind of stuffy, try to be annoying. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Back on topic. So we've talked about self-publishing versus traditional, agent versus indie. So another important part of this process, the pitch. The part that everybody hates, maybe more than writing the synopsis. What advice do you guys have for new writers when they're trying to pitch their book?
Oh, I'm such a bad person to ask. I've never had to pitch a book. I just really, because I had a full book when I went in front of my agent. I got the full manuscript in front of Sarah Megavow. She's amazing. And, no matter what happens, it's the quality of your writing. You might skip over a step or two, but at some point, what you wrote needs to stand on its own. But I'm going to defer to everyone else on that question, other than I do know that shock value never works as well as you think it might work when you're making a pitch. And read the websites or the Twitter accounts or social media accounts of agents who talk about things that horrify them, because that is where you really find out the "do not go beyond this point" sign in front of your pitch.
I heard a horror story from, he was a senior editor at Tor, and before that he was with Simon & Schuster. Guy had sent his manuscript up to the editorial office underneath a pizza. So, so it's grease-soaked and gross, and I'm sure it got read a whole lot. But I'm sure they ate the pizza. I have no doubt of that. They ate the pizza. I think that the first pitch I ever did, and since then most of them have been written pitches, but the first one was a verbal pitch. It was to Stacy Hill. We were talking after that panel, and I said, I'm working on this Western. It's kind of a cross between if Zane Grey and H.P. Lovecraft decided to write a book together. And I was writing the Western for myself. It was for pleasure. I really didn't think I was ever going to find anybody who'd be interested in buying this thing. And she's like, well, we're looking for some Westerns. And I was just like, really? Okay. So I think that if you are genuine when you're coming at somebody, you're talking to them, and you're talking to them like a person, you're not shoving a manuscript into their face or following. I was at a convention as a guest, and this was years and years and years ago, but literally one of the editors who was there as a guest got followed into the restroom by a guy who was trying to pitch his book. And the people you're pitching to are human beings. They get tired and overloaded, because when most people, when you go into a con, it's for fun, but if you're a writer or an editor or a guest, you're working. And, it'd be nice to have 5 minutes in between panels where you're not getting beat over the head with somebody's work. So slow and steady, make an introduction. If you don't have a card, I kind of recommend you get cards. I had them for years, and then I stopped. And just recently, some very dear friends of mine actually gifted me some cards. So they're great to have to just kind of introduce yourself, and then you can kind of follow up from there. I don't think a shock pitch or like a kind of a kick in the door kind of pitch does you or your book a great deal of service. I think it's easier to get to know people and let them know that you're not just there just to try to get something from them, and that that's always helped. You know, with going forward, that's helped a lot with the editors that I've worked with and the publishers I've worked with.
I'll write a pitch any day over a synopsis. God, I hate writing this.
Amen.
You know, Katie, I'm really envious because Sarah is always one of my top. Every time I send it to her, she asks for more. I send it back to her. She sends me a rejection. I'm like, one of these times I'm going to write a book she likes. You know, Sarah's a really good resource. Ann Tibbetts on Twitter is a really good resource. You know, and Ann's really cool because she puts out, you know, a couple times a week why I passed on manuscripts today. You know, and I was talking to her over Twitter, and she was like, "Yeah, 75% of my pitches are not to query submission guidelines, so they just get auto rejected. So, you know, follow the guidelines." I think the thing with a good pitch is it has to be the same reason you would pick up and buy a book if you were in the bookstore. When you pick it up and you flip it over and you read the back and it grabs you, that's what your pitch has to be, which means you need to, it's kind of like having a puppy. You take it to everybody and hand it to them. Read this, read this, read this, read this, read it. And, you know, and get feedback from all sorts of different people, you know, and when they're like, when you're constantly getting back the, wow, I'd really like to read that, then your pitch is probably ready. And then it's, you know, it's a crapshoot. You know, you send it out into the void and hope to hell somebody actually likes it.
Yay, that's the thing we all hope for. One of the things that tends to come up when you're dealing with this type of thing is that publisher legit? And we all know there are a lot of scams out there. There are a lot of different ways you can go. And when you're new to this, that's scary. So let's talk about that. How do you tell a legit publisher or a legit agent from a scam? And what types of things have you guys seen, or what kind of horror stories have you heard about these things, kind of as a warning to new writers? I'm gonna put Patrick on the spot again. Make him go first.
No problem. So, you know, the rule is money always flows to the author. If you are self-published and you're paying an editor or you're paying, you know, proofing or any of that, that is perfectly fine. But if you were talking to an agent and they say, we require $500 as a reading fee, it's a scam. If they're saying, well, we need you to buy X amount of books, it's a scam. You, as an author, you never pay money to get your book published. You know, unless you're indie and then you're buying services. You know, we were at one convention, and this lady came up and she spent $15,000, and she was retired Navy, and she spent $15,000 to get her books published, and they sent her a couple boxes of books, and that was it. I mean, it was incredible. We were like, and she still was like, no, this is great. I didn't want to wait for, you know, all this stuff to happen. I just wanted my book out. I need to get my career going. And we're like, you're getting ripped off. And, you know, it's just, you know, and you just have to, you know, if it sounds too good, it probably is. It's all this stuff with everything on the internet. If you are being asked for money, 99% of the time it's a scam. And you can always go out to, there's a site, Writers Beware, where you should be checking anybody you're talking to. You know, and any good agent or publisher will give you people to talk to as far as recommendations. Like if I was going to work with Lucienne, I would talk to Rod and he would rave about her like he does, and you would know that she was legit. So, which also goes back to the networking, because then you can ask around to see who's, you know, who has which agents and, you know, what they like about them, so on and so forth. But it keeps you out of trouble, and it also sanity checks you when you're like, well, could this happen? And people are like, no. And then you just know, it protects you.
Before I started writing fiction, I did journalism and pretty much was just a writer for hire for years and years and years. And there is and I think this is maybe less the case in fiction publishing, but journalism, there really is this kind of concept of, well, anybody could do what you do. So there were at least a couple of clients. One of them was a bar association. Another was a city. Another was the National Association of Realtors, who all stiffed me on pay. They paid me for part of the job, but they didn't agree to pay what we had agreed to. So get a contract. Get a contract, and never let any. And something else is, when I was doing a lot more journalism stuff and doing less fiction, is there are so many people out there who are just desperate to get a byline, desperate to get in print, get their name in print, that they're willing to take these horrible jobs for lousy money. And one of the things I really do recommend, I don't really care where you're at in your career, know your value and don't compromise that. If somebody wants you to do a job, you tell them how much you're going to do that for. You stick to your end of it, but you make sure you have some kind of an instrument in place so they stick to their end. As far as like fiction publishing goes, a few years back, I wrote a story for an anthology with a publisher I had never worked with before. They invited me to write for the anthology. And I enjoyed doing it, and it worked out well. But when it got time for us to get paid, we kept getting these emails talking about how there had been, cash had to be diverted here, diverted there. It was a really clever tap dance, but it was basically, they said they were paying people kind of as they could. And this wasn't what was agreed to in the contract. It also wasn't, the fact was they had crowdfunded this thing. So they had the money, they had the resources, but for some reason they were just taking their time paying the writers off. And I happened, in another conversation about somebody else, I happened to mention this to Lucy Ann, to my agent, and she knew some of the people involved in this project, and she knew some of the publishers involved in it. And within like 48 hours, I got paid. So it does happen. Basically, I think what Patrick was saying is probably the best advice I would give on the subject is, if you have been writing for a while, go to conventions, promote yourself, you're going to meet other people who are writers. And if people have a good reputation, that gets around. If they have a lousy reputation, it gets around. I would just make sure that whoever you're dealing with, you have some kind of a contract. Though the problem is a lot of times, even with a contract, if you're a freelance writer, you don't probably have an attorney on retainer or something like that. But it is one more step in kind of trying to avoid that sort of thing. And usually, if they really want you for the job, they're going to pay you, and they'll pay you promptly. So don't accept. I've have heard lots of horror stories about anthologies where it all got put together and then no one got paid for it, even though they were supposed to. So you just have to kind of, I'd say, vet with the people that you know and trust that are in the business, and look them up online. Look and see what kind of stuff you can find for them if you do a search on them.
I can't add anything to those answers. The great answer is do your research, and then do some more research.
Now, I will add one other thing. Rod, you were talking about making sure you have that contract. You definitely need to read the contract and make sure you understand it really well too, because I have seen contracts from several different publishers that seem legitimate on the outside, but some of the things they put into them can be really dangerous. I've seen clauses in contracts where it holds publication rights for the work in perpetuity, where it asks for rights for different publication styles, but it doesn't tell you how they're going to pay you for it. I actually saw a contract one time where they wanted audio and potential film rights when they bought the book, but the author wasn't going to get anything for any of them. You know, so it's more than just they want me to pay them a whole bunch of money. Once you get into it, and if that contract is not, that doesn't seem legit to you, walk away. You know, you can always find somewhere else to take that book. Don't saddle yourself to something that's going to hurt you in the long run. Because I've seen too much of that with a lot of these newer, smaller presses. A lot of people are out in it just to make money. They're not, and a lot of new writers don't know to look for those things that are going to have them over a barrel. And when you sign that contract, you've given it to them, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get it back sometimes.
And there are a lot of folks who are just so eager to get into print, to get published, that they don't take the time to kind of value themselves, value their work, and vet that. But you're right. I've seen plenty of contracts like that where they're kind of vague on, especially on some like the royalties you get for like other avenues of publication.
Yeah. If it doesn't tell you how much you're going to get in royalties for each one of those publication options, then you don't need to sign it.
Yeah, that is one of the nice things about it. My agent too is she looks over the contracts before I sign them. So that is another kind of a valuable thing for having an agent.
We talked about networking, but as far as marketing goes for new writers, you know, networking is definitely the key in all of this. Making friends, finding allies in the business. But beyond that, you know, other than the networking, what suggestions do you guys have for a new author with a fresh contract just getting started? Now, I'll start with Katie this time.
I think out of everything that we've talked about, this is the one that I feel the most passionate about because I've been really, really lucky with readers. I have the best readers in the world. I mean, they're engaged. A lot of them have read my books multiple times. They send artwork and song recommendations. They talk about the book to their friends. It's pretty much all the success I've had has been grassroots. And because of that, I cannot underestimate or overestimate the premium I place on interacting with my readers, that to be accessible to them on whatever my chosen media is. I pick Twitter, that's what I use, not Facebook or Instagram or anything, though my readers, I did set up a Discord channel for my books, which I don't have much to do with it, but I poke my head in every now and then. But I when they compliment me, I compliment them back. I've read every review left on my books, and I listened to what they're saying. In some cases, it helped me course correct for novel 2, and it made a big difference. That's been just without a doubt one of the best parts of the experience. And out of any marketing I could do, building a reader base was better than anything. You'll talk to a lot of writers who sink their own money into marketing and publicity, because unless you get one of the big 5 publishers, really there's not a good chance your book's going to be heavily marketed and promoted. It's just not the way it is anymore. It's not the world it was 20 or 30 years ago, but there are other things you can do. You don't want to be one of fall into the pitfalls of new writers, which is spending pretty much all of your advance on marketing. There are other things you can do that don't cost anything. Just again, as simply as engaging with your readers as you get them, being accessible, listening to what they have to say. I do a lot of free content. I've been doing mini quarantine scenes with my characters, and I'm going to be publishing a free novella at the end of the month. For me, this has been the marketing that's paid off, and it's building my reader base that keeps on growing, and hopefully will carry me on for the next 7 novels I want to write.
I agree with Katie. I think interacting with your readers is the best marketing you can do. I put a premium on my newsletter. Newsletter Ninja by Tammy Larricat, fantastic book. And basically she's great because she just says, do this, do this, do this, do this. And you just follow through the book and set it up. But I get, when I send out my newsletters, they're fun. I put pictures of my dog, and, like I dyed my daughter's hair the other day, so it was in the newsletter. And, it's all sorts of, because they're more interested in talking to you as a person than they are a lot of times is, they love your books, but they want to know who you are. They want to read your books because they like you. They want to make sure, like when I met Rod, I love his books. He's super. I was like really pleased because you don't want to meet an author and be like, I love your books, but you're a dick, So, So I do my newsletter is my big thing. So once a month I send it out. I do giveaways and that sort of stuff. But I get feedback all the time. I get people sending me pictures. I get people, sending me emails, about stuff. They ping me on Facebook, so that is the best part of, for me, being an author, is the interactions with the people who have read and really connected with your work.
I agree with both of them, what they're saying. Gratitude is essential. You do see some authors who have egos that are not proportionate to their talent or their reach, and I try to go out of my way. I use social media. I have a Facebook account. I have a Twitter account. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Twitter. My agent makes me go on Twitter and put those things, but I don't particularly care for Twitter that much. But I'm also an old guy, so it's okay. But Facebook, the community I have on Facebook for my author page, I have gotten so much just love and response. I mean, if someone's taking a chunk of their life, they are never going to get back to read one of my books. I need to be appreciative of that. They're not, they're doing me a favor. I'm not doing them. They are, and there are days, there are days where you're grinding and you're hitting that wall, and then you get an email from somebody that just makes your day. I have a PO box that is on my website. I've gotten letters from folks. I have a guy. One of the series I write has to do with truck drivers, and I have a fellow who is a truck driver who is writing fan fiction for my books. And I told him that when we get it finished up and edited, I'll publish it on my Facebook page or get it up somewhere on one of my social media sites. The people, you grow that organically. You grow it by, if someone puts up something nice on your page or your wall or your tweet, you thank them. Mm-hmm. Don't just go, oh, well, of course, you actually spend some time and thank them personally. And that has paid off so much whenever I've promoted something that way through my people. And I talk to them about what's going on in life, good things, bad things that are happening. And it really is like having a big family, and it will pay off because those folks will, they'll buy pretty much, if you say, hey, I've got this book going, they will go out and find it and then give you some more feedback on it. So I think that building that community, however you do it, like conventions, going to conventions, doing readings, doing signings, don't blow somebody off in the hallway, actually talk to them, which is hard to do because sometimes you're running from one panel to the other. I was at a panel in, I think it was Williamsburg. It might have been RavenCon, but I had a fellow that had come from Norfolk, and he only had a few hours, and then he had to go back. He came to talk to me because he read one of my books and really liked it. And I was hungry and tired and a little hungover, and I had a little bit of time between panel A and panel B, and I spent it with him because that's amazing. that's just something that doesn't happen very often to you, that you connect with somebody like that. So what the fellows have said, I agree with completely. You build that and you don't take them for granted.
One thing I kind of feel like I should have made this disclaimer before we started talking about marketing, but the thing I've noticed, everybody's kind of saying the same thing here, but I think new writers really do also need to understand that there is no magic bullet that's just going to make this happen. That, your reader engagement, your newsletters, your social media, those are all great tools and they work. They don't cost a lot of money, but what works for each of us may not work for somebody else. And we can all do exactly the same thing, but our readerships are going to be different because our writing styles, our subject matter, it's all different. You have to find what works for you. And it's tough, especially for somebody like me who is absolutely terrible at marketing, who does not like to talk about themselves, who is a horrible introvert. But, you get there. The other thing I'd like to add is, a lot of your marketing is online. Just plain and simple, don't be an idiot on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to argue, don't feed the trolls. Don't be a troll. Be nice, be friendly, say please and thank you, have manners. Even if you don't have them in real life, pretend to have them on the internet where you can be anybody you want to be. But yeah, yeah.
Well, it's customer service.
Yes.
You are providing a product. Why would you go and alienate some percentage of your audience, of your customer base? You can have your opinions about whatever you want to have, and you can share those separate from from your work. So it's just like any other workplace. You don't want to sit there and spend all your time kind of throwing around stuff that's just going to irritate people. You're there to do a job.
Yes.
So some authors do make
Oh.
their personality is they're going after what they're on their hill, they're going to die there, and I'm like, okay, that
I know several of them. Yeah,
and it works for them. It works for them. It's not something I'd be comfortable with, but like Scalzi, he's very outspoken, and people flock to him because he is. So,
but then you don't really know how many people don't flock to him.
Right, exactly.
Because you make one comment offhand, and how many hundreds or thousands of people are just turned off by that.
Yep.
I'm not saying don't have an opinion, but just you're doing a job. Of course, Scalzi makes enough money that I don't think he really cares anymore what he says.
You do see that every day with celebrities. Somebody can make an offhanded comment that they're not even really thinking, and it can ruin a career.
Yep.
So, yeah. So we're just about out of time. Does anybody have anything else they want to add that we didn't touch on? Because I know y'all probably had some ideas. Yes.
Update your website. Make a website.
And then update it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to do that.
I'm terrible at that. I have things from like 2 years ago up on my website. So yeah.
But it's a good jumping on point for a lot of new readers.
Yeah, you need to have a platform before you go out with a book, because agents do go out and look to see what you do on Twitter, what you do on Facebook. If you have a website, that type stuff. It doesn't even have to be fancy. It just has to be, there.
I guess I would just say, don't be afraid. No matter what type of a personality you are, in every bucket of thing we've talked about before publication, finding an agent, figuring out marketing, there's always something that you can do that you would feel comfortable doing. You don't have to follow in everyone's footsteps if that's something that's antithetical to your personality. There is something you can do within being an introvert, for instance, such as myself. In every element of this, there's something that is easy for an introvert to do that I took advantage of, and that's what I focused on. So don't be afraid. I mean, you're going to have hurdles in front of you, but you're going to be able to manage them.
That is very good advice. It's not easy. None of this is easy, but you can make it fun, and you meet some amazing people on the journey.
Definitely.
So if there's nothing else, thank you guys. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been great.